Hold on to your seat, slappers. Coming up next, old guys, balls, and high stakes. It's exactly what you think it is. Coming up on the Michael Welch Podcast.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat turn into a Bentley. See, I'm stunning, so I'm all I'm thinking.
All right, so let's hold off on our high stakes, aka the NFL playoffs, and our old guys right now, which are the some of the coaches retiring that have hit the headlines, of course. And let's start with our balls, our big football national championship news. Of course, the Michigan Wolverines won the playoffs. It was pretty exciting for my household, my father, my brothers. My grandfather was a big Michigan fan, Bo Schembechler, of course, and my brothers, both graduates of the University of Michigan. One of them that watches sports, one of them that cares much less, but still a house divided in the Michigan area. So a lot of excitement, a lot of friends as well, and relatives excited for the Michigan Wolverines. Now, big deal, of course. I have an old hat from the 97 split decision national championship shared with Nebraska at the time. Split AP and coaches poll decisions there. Of course, it's hard to believe that was within the past 30 years that's been the case, where we had multiple national championships when we could have easily decided that with a football game, you know. Nevertheless, we did not do that until the recent even the BCS era sometimes had some dispute over whether the two teams selected to play for national title were indeed the best two teams. The 14 bracket that we've done the past decade helped square things up a bit, and moving to the extended playoffs, it will probably ultimately end up in the same, four-ish teams at the top, probably presenting themselves in some form or fashion or combination in the top two playing for a championship every year, but it makes things a lot more interesting. So let's revisit the semifinal games real quick here. And Alabama-Michigan was a good football, entertaining football, competitive football. Which of the boxes did it check? Good football at times, entertaining, yes. Competitive, certainly. The first play was nearly a pick by J.J. McCarthy, coming in, having to kind of prove himself a little bit. And can he perform in high-pressure situations against Georgia and TCU in the playoffs in 2 previous years? He did not. Of course, beating Ohio State in those same 2 years. Great attribute, to him, especially last season in being able to throw for a whole bunch of yardage on Ohio State. Did not have to do that as much this season, but really those are the only big games that he's had under his belt. And as we saw throughout this game, he did not have to do a whole lot either. But the very first play, nearly interception, overruled. Not sure what the hell he was looking at, and it could have gone the other way had the Alabama player been able to stay in bounds there. Quick 3 and out. The offensive line with a little bit of shuffle there on the right side with the injury to Zinter held up pretty well and held up throughout the game pretty well. Alabama's first drive, 2 sacks on Milroe. And Bama's opening drive, the offensive line, particularly the freshman left tackle, was pointed out by the broadcast, is really struggling. So a quick out by them as well. And Michigan immediately fumbled the punt as they were about to go to their second possession there, and it went to Alabama. One note, it looks like he just kind of lost it in the sun as it was about to set there or almost setting there. We always talk about games being played. They should be played in more than warm weather areas. They should also be played in areas where it could be rainy or cold. In the Midwest, some of these bowl games, not necessarily in ideal weather, and perhaps that should be incorporated in football as it is throughout the season. And it's going to be in the future here, presumably with the playoffs, the expanded playoffs here. So, but another thing to note is sometimes just the sun causes problems. So it does bring that variability into the game, and it particularly did in this one where it was a one-possession game going into overtime as well. And just keep that in mind. We could play in a dome with just lights and just play an uninterrupted by weather type of football game. But just as much as snow and wind and all the other things, we do see just like sunshine playing in the evening sometimes disrupt players. So it looks like he just lost this one in the sun. And so he must have had 2 turnovers right off the gate for Michigan. But this does go back to Alabama. They're able to convert a 3rd and short to keep a drive going for a little bit there. And McClellan takes a 34-yard carry in for a touchdown after a defensive back whiffs on the tackle. So they're able to get things going for a little bit there. On their second possession are the Crimson Tide after the first real turnover by Michigan. So the second possession for the Wolverines, able to crack a big outside run. They convert a 4th and 1. A lot of success running on the outside on both sides, really. Doesn't matter that they have some adjustments to the offensive line there. Throw a couple big plays off of play action. And J.J. McCarthy looks okay in the beginning, throwing off those play actions, able to make a few pretty good throws, all things considered, and able to work their way down the field. Corum is not a receiving target out of the backfield, but the linebackers do not cover him in the red zone, and he's able to walk in for an open touchdown and convert off a nice play for their first touchdown there. Alabama, another 3 and out on their next possession. Bad Milroe throw. He tries to convert on, I believe it's 3rd down, slips, scrambles. So just a self-inflicted, issue there. Just kind of catches himself. Then the punter is hit on the punt. No flag is thrown on that. In kind of a weird sequence where he's clearly knocked down. I mean, there's no question about it. He's knocked down. Michigan comes back on their next drive. Personal foul. Kills it. They convert a 1st down that's then called back. Then they have to punt. Alabama, again, multiple sacks on their next drive. Kills it. They struggle with the blitz. Milroe's under fire. Another 3 and out for Michigan on their next drive. JJ misses an open target on 2nd down. They can't get anything going. Goes back to Alabama, who starts on their 30-yard line. This is going to be productive. 3 and out on 4 of their first 5 drives, and that's a real problem for them in the first half as that happens to them again. Problems with the blitz, problems with 4-man pressure, problems trying to get out of the pocket a lot of the times. Just very difficult for Milroe to get going at all, and just problems all over the place on offense for Alabama outside of not the opening drive, the first real possession that they were able to get going there off the punt that put them in plus territory. So their first opportunity to convert there in real decent position. The 5th possession for Michigan. 8 plays, 83 yards, 4 minutes and 38 seconds on the drive. Corum hit a few big runs that really showed how vulnerable Alabama's going to be. They had a big trick play. You can expect something every game in these big contests from Michigan, from the wide receiver throwing it back to Corum. I don't remember if it was Roman Wilson or not. Throwing it back to Corum, who had to reach up and grab it. Not a great throw on the throw back to J.J. McCarthy, but he does release it downfield and is able to get a nice 1st down and a conversion, although he's rattled a little bit. Doesn't seem to affect him for the remainder of the game, though. They ultimately score off a big 38-yard crossing route to Tyler Morris, who was able to break into the secondary and get things going there. They missed the extra point is blocked. Botched. It's botched. Blocked, botched. Can't read my own notes. They screw it up. But 13-7, Michigan is the lead after that drive. They put a nice chunk together there. Alabama, just before half, they put a nice little drive together. They kick a field goal. Michigan's pressure ultimately prevents them from continuing it and scoring a touchdown. So at the half, what we had was 2 for 7 on 3rd down for Bama, 1 for 5 for 3rd for Michigan. So it was not very attractive early. 96 total yards for Bama, 197 for Michigan, 6.6 yards per pass. for Alabama, 8.2 for Michigan, 2.5 per run play for Bama, 4.8 for Michigan. The Wolverines also had 5 sacks for negative 44 yards on the Alabama Crimson Tide, who had 5 total first downs, 9 for the Michigan Wolverines. And again, 96 total yards for Bama at the half. Not much coming from anybody. J.J. McCarthy himself was 9 for 14 for 115 yards, couple touchdowns, 9 yards rushing. So at half, the thought process is Michigan looks like the better team here. Bama can't get much going. If they'd stop turning the ball over, they've been able to drive the field certainly more than Alabama has been. They've been much more productive. Alabama's only score came when we set them up in plus territory off of a fumble. They just look much better, but they're not ahead by that much. A 1-possession game. As I take my aggression out on my microphone here, Alabama at half, 15 dropbacks, 8 pressures, 5 sacks. So just lots of problems there. They come out in the second half. The Tide do a couple first downs, but 2 horrible snaps as the center problems start to show up, and lost 19 yards total. Just absolutely implodes the drive. Just horrible way to start out there when they could have gone the length of the field and either cut down the score or taken the lead. So absolutely falling apart to come out of the second half. Negative yardage. Just embarrassing. Michigan outdoes themselves a little bit. They brought in Alex Orji on second down their next drive out, ran for a loss. I don't know what the game plan is. Sometimes you didn't really need to do that if you were Harbaugh and the offensive coordinator there. Tyler Morris makes what should have been a first down catch, but he falls down short, and that ends up in a punt. So Alabama not able to do a whole lot more. The Milton misses a third down swing pass just into the ground. And Michigan comes out not able to do much either. Misses a wide open third down pass between his receiver's hands. J.J. McCarthy does. Just another gaffe for Michigan there. Alabama on their next possession, which is their 9th of the game, they get 3 first downs, which almost accounts for a third of their total for the game at this particular point. They get in the red zone for the first time. McClellan has runs of 9, 10, and 18 yards to set up his second touchdown run as Alabama puts its first full-length real drive together. That gives them the lead 17-13 at that particular point. Michigan can't get anything going the next couple of possessions, including a strip fumble for Milroe the next time that Alabama comes out, and Michigan screws up a flea flicker and misses a field goal, 49-yarder. So just more mistakes on both sides there. Alabama is able to put a 5-minute plus drive together, almost 6-minute drive together, 9 plays in the fourth quarter. And Michigan's able to hold them to a field goal once they get a big sack in the play. And Alabama was able to nail that and go up a touchdown. But it's a big stop there by Michigan to hold it within 7 points. And the Wolverines themselves are able to convert a big 4th and 2, hit a big 27-yard play. And this gets a little messy as well. A block in the back sets them back. Then JJ is able to crack a big 16-yard run outside. And they eventually able to work it down to Roman Wilson on a 16-yard pass completion off a tipped ball that will certainly be on a highlight reel. And JJ ultimately hits him again for a 4-yard touchdown. Extra point. Good for the tie with 1:34 left. And Michigan's able to stop Alabama on a critical play and ends up forcing overtime. They did fumble the punt, and that'll go down as a legendary moment. About 40 seconds left, so maybe Michigan could have drove down for a field goal. But on the flip side, they didn't lose the game on a critical mistake there. So really, Michigan was able to kind of scrape by despite outplaying Alabama there. In overtime, Milroe was, of course, stuffed. They had the second possession. Michigan pretty easily scored with Corum, and that was about it. It seemed like a bad, either a bad play call or kind of a panic by Milroe, and the defensive line just blew it up, and Miller just gets stuffed up the middle, and not a very good execution there on the very last play of the game for Alabama. And a win for Michigan, 27-20, a game in which they screwed up from the very beginning, almost screwed up at the very end of regulation, and ultimately a game in which Alabama screwed up on the very last play. So, competitive football. Yes, entertaining football. Certainly good football. I think it's actually understated how much of a mess that this game was. It was just really a disaster. The turnovers were one apiece, but it looked much worse than that. 3 for 13 on third down were the Tide. 2 for 11 were Michigan. And yes, these two defenses are great. Certainly taking that into account. 288 yards of offense for Alabama. 351 for Michigan as they greatly outplayed the Tide. Both teams averaging about 4 yards per carry, 5 yards per pass for Bama, 8.2 for Michigan, right around that same halftime mark. Not a lot of penalties, 5 combined, although there were a couple of critical ones there that killed drives, killed conversions. Not great in that particular aspect. And really, not a whole lot from these two quarterbacks. Now, J.J. McCarthy's stat line is going to come out looking pretty good. It was 17 for 27, 221, 3 touchdowns. He ran for 25 yards on a few carries. So he certainly did what he needed to do. As the saying goes, he did what he needed to do. But to say he was super prolific in this game, that was not the case. If he didn't make a few mistakes, hit a few more throws, wide open throws that Alabama allowed him, then they wouldn't have necessarily been in this situation. He could have made up for some of the other flaws that his teammates were making. Milroe was 16 for 23, 116 yards. Again, 5 per average on throws, 3 yards per carry on 21 carries, came to 63 yards. Not great. The snapping problems, of course, came up as a big deal afterwards. Snapping problems, high, low, all over the place. Problem throughout the year for Alabama. And, of course, not fixed in the month of preparation here. Just horrible for Alabama. Offensive line sucked. Defensive line and linebackers seemed to struggle a bit. Michigan had so many screw-ups, but the O-line, run game, defense was overall just too good. But still, what does it tell you when they're that close to Alabama and probably a full step, maybe even a step and a half above in how they performed this year? Let's flip to Texas and Washington, and I'm not going to run through my full note log here for this game. This was a victory, 37-31 for Washington, who put a little distance between themselves and Texas in the third quarter. It did go to halftime, 21-21. Not a lot of third down conversions for this going into the half either. Washington was hitting quite a few big plays. It actually started with Texas. Couple false starts, tipped balls. They're only 38% conversion rate on third down as it was on the season, and they had struggles throughout this game. Did a good job limiting Washington on the actual third down conversions, but the big plays really started to hurt them. The reserve running backs, if you will, C.J. Baxter, Jadon Blue, who actually was a punt returner for them in this game and set them up into some decent positions, did a good job, particularly in the first half. It wasn't actually until Texas's fourth drive that I tallied Quinn Ewers completing a pass past the line of scrimmage. That's another thing they do quite a bit. Those swing passes, those screen passes, whatever you want to call the different kind of things that they do there. You know, the technical terminology is they get the ball going horizontally and kind of run after the catch, and a whole lot of that to start the game. So Washington's defense, which has certainly gotten crushed on the metrics and carved up in its own right at times, but they did play some good offenses. You know, Oregon twice, USC, Oregon State, Arizona, Washington when they were going strong. Texas did a little number on their reserves, particularly late in that matchup as well. So they did have some problems, but they did play some good teams as well. So they did a good job in this particular game for the most part. And going into the half, at least, they did a good job as well, preventing them from throwing a lot downfield and converting on third down, which was already a struggle for them. The first half stats were 1 for 5 on third for Texas, 0 for 3 on Washington, 213 yards for Texas, 6.4 yards per carry, though, 305 yards for Washington, 17 yards per pass. C.J. Baxter, 7 carries for 53 yards, 7.6 yards per carry and a touchdown. Jaden Blue, 4 carries for 24, 6 yards per carry and a touchdown. Ewers, 9 for 18 for 97 yards. He just didn't look super sharp throughout the game. Penix was 11 for 14 for 255 yards and a touchdown. That's 18.2 per pass attempt. Polk had 2 catches for 106 yards and a touchdown. And he was just pivotal to what they were able to do there. Texas also had 6 penalties for 36 yards, and it was 1 penalty for Washington for 4 yards. So just a tremendous, tremendous difference in how the yardage was gained for each of those teams. In Washington, Penix actually missed a big throw for a wide open touchdown to Oduzzi at one point. They also fumbled a punt that set up Texas at the 22-yard line, I believe, that was converted to a touchdown. And they also had a pass interference touchdown just before half that helped continue a Texas drive that scored the game-tying touchdown. So Washington, in coming out of victor, certainly had its own problems and kind of pulled Texas along to keep it an interesting game. Coming in the second half, now Washington scored on its first 3 possessions, but 2 of them were field goals and 1 was a touchdown, so kept it an interesting game. Texas fumbled on its first 2 possessions that helped allow a couple of those scores. And eventually Quinn Ewers put his best drive together late, actually top of the fourth quarter, when he went 5 for 6 for 68 yards and a touchdown to O'Donnell Mitchell, which made it a touchdown game at that point, a 34-28 score. Made it a lot closer than it seemed when the defense was able to make those stops. But eventually Washington's able to pull away. Texas does score a late touchdown in the fourth with under a minute left to make it close. But it's just not Texas's day, unfortunately. They get some pressure on Michael Penix, and for the most part, he's not sacked at all in this game. He gets away from it, gets his throws away, and exploits that Texas secondary. And all the Texas problems that they've had come to fruition. They're not good on third down. They struggle in the red zone. They're not able to capitalize on an opportunity in the certainly the second half. I think it's the third quarter, and the secondary has some problems. So what you have been struggling with as far as Texas is concerned all year. And Quinn Ewers, who was 24 for 43 for 318, 7.4 yards a pass, so he was getting it downfield a little bit. 1 touchdown, but really unspectacular. He ran for 54 yards. So the stats look great for him too, but just doesn't look like a superstar out there most of the time. Now, turnovers hurt Texas, penalties hurt Texas, 10 penalties altogether for them, the 2 second half turnovers. Washington did a pretty good job defensively, preventing the big plays. Offensive line did a good job. 10 straight games, 10 straight wins by 10 points or less for Washington. They had 9 passes of 15-plus yards, and Penix was 7 of 11 for 257 yards on passes of 15-plus yards in the air. That is damage. He was 29 for 38 overall for 430 yards, 11.3 yards per attempt, and just a pair of touchdowns. He also had 31 yards on the ground as well. And just an excellent day for that particular group. Oduzzi had 6 grabs for 125. That's over 20 yards per grab. Polk had 5 for 122. That's over 24 yards per grab. McMillan had 5 for 58. That's over 11 yards per grab. Bernard had 3 for 48. That's right on the dot, actually, 16 yards per average. He had a big 29-yarder. And Texas, Xavier Worthy, 2 for 45, Whittingham, 4 for 70, Sanders, 6 for 75. So they got those big plays as well eventually against Washington. but it was the Huskies with the big plays and the better drives in the end. 4 for 11 and 3 for 11 on third down, comparable. 532 yards to 498 for Texas, so comparable yardage. 11 yards per pass, though, and 7.4 Washington's way. 6.4 yards per carry for Texas and 3.3 for Washington. 15 total penalties, 3 turnovers. So another kind of sloppy game. And competitive football, good football. Good football for the most part. But again, 2 sloppy semifinal games, but 2 good semifinal games here. And then the national championship, where the line opened at 2.5, I believe, and pushed all the way to 4.5, maybe 5, Michigan's way. And I was hoping to have my brother here live to discuss this game, but he's stuck trying to fly into home state Michigan with blizzards flying out of Tucson into state here. But we'll talk to him soon about the weirdness going on with Michigan basketball and the excitement around the football program with the national championship and what's happening moving forward. But as for this actual game, we of course had a 41-yard touchdown run on the first possession from Donovan Edwards. Then we had a 47-yard run out of the pistol formation while Washington was confused on defense on the second possession. And the third possession, we got Corum back in the mix, ripping off a 59-yard run and putting up that historic number of several hundred rushing yards, close to 200 rushing yards in the first quarter for the Michigan Wolverines there, in a 17-3 lead in that first section. And Washington constantly under pressure. Michael Penix struggling to throw off platform, and we knew that was going to be a problem with that defensive front of Michigan, which started to get pressure with just 4 guys without bringing a blitz. But in that first half, to my recollection, they did bring a lot of pressure from different areas and caused just so many problems with that Washington front. Washington didn't help themselves with false start penalties that they've also had problems with, going back to that offensive line. Then Michigan started to slow down a little bit, started to have some problems. JJ missed a couple of big throws. They stalled out around midfield. When they punted it back to Washington, about the halfway through the second quarter, they didn't even pin them deep. It went out the back of the end zone, the punt did. So Washington was able to get the ball back and start put a little drive together. Washington was able to get a touchdown drive together, hitting McMillan, Penix to McMillan in the end zone for 5 yards towards the end of the first half. There's also a missed throw by Penix as well, really caused by that defense and some of the disruption, but ultimately just a missed walk-in touchdown throw to Oduzzi, I believe, that was quite noticeable. He might have been tackled short, but he was wide open, and just a missed throw. That's probably a touchdown. Pretty much looked like it. But at half, we had Penix 13 for 21, 128 yards, only 6.1 per pass on that. 1 touchdown. Oduzzi had 3 catches for 35. McMillan 4 for 28 and a touchdown. Polk 1 for 15. They had 32 total rushing downs. They were 2 for 7 on third down and 1 for 2 on fourth. Michigan, JJ, 5 for 11 passing. Not a key part of this offense, especially with the rushing yards, as we know. 81 yards passing, 7.4 per attempt. Edwards had 3 carries for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns. Corum 8 for 84. Mullings 3 for 21, 209 total rushing yards. Third down, though, they were 0 for 4, and that was problematic moving forward. 0 for 1 on fourth down. No turnovers, 2 penalties each, a 290 to 160 yardage edge towards Michigan. 4 plays of 20-plus yards for Michigan and 0 for Washington. They finished with 1, I believe, on the entire game. Significant difference, again, from the previous matchup and from their total, on the year. One of the leaders in the country of big explosive plays with those big-time receivers downfield and that Penix arm. Now, arguably, one of the biggest plays in the second half is the first one on the third quarter. Washington is now down a touchdown. They have an opportunity to come and tie the game. They get the ball coming out of the half. And Penix just throws a pick immediately. He's under pressure. He gets his ankle rolled up on. You have to wonder if that hurts at least the next possession and his ability to plant and throw with the way some of the balls go. And he throws a pick. Defensive back makes a great grab on it. Michigan ultimately has to settle for a field goal, and that's how third quarter goes. Guys struggling to convert. A penalty kills a Washington conversion, which is a 32-yard reception that's called back. JJ's tripped up going for a third down conversion, scrambling for one. So ultimately we end up with one field goal apiece for each team in the third quarter in a punt fest where things kind of slow down there. In the fourth quarter, Michigan is able to put 2 touchdowns on the board to kind of salt this one away, as Washington just can't get anything going, can't get any plays really going downfield again. We get another Washington false start. They're working behind the sticks a little bit. We have more sacks, more pressures. The punt starts to work. Field position in Michigan's position, advantageous position a few times. And we have another Penix pick that's returned inside the 10-yard line that allows Michigan to punch one in to kind of put an exclamation point on it towards the end there. And Corum sets the record for touchdowns there at Michigan State in a season. So Penix ultimately is actually only sacked one time, but he's hit several. Let me see if I got an exact number here. It's accredited 1 sack, 3 tackles for loss, 4 passes defended. I guess I don't have the exact number here. I'm still sure it's floating out there. But for those of us that got eyes on it and watched a good chunk of this, if not the whole game, he was always, under pressure in the offensive line. Of course, if you watched well into the second half there, offensive line were constantly getting pushed straight back into his face. So just wild there to see. And Michigan, I still go back to my original point. Fortunately, after Michigan wins, we don't hear as much about the cheating now. Maybe that's because of the NFL speculation and Harbaugh possibly leaving and some of the other things going on in college football. But the cheating matters, of course it does, making sure everyone's on a level playing field, even if the stipulations seem trivial. And it's important that everyone follows those, but there is no, again, real strict rule enforcers right now, even with the NCAA. I mean, they could come down with a powerful punishment, but that doesn't really hurt anyone. Harbaugh could leave, half this roster could go pro, and who's that really hurt, right? And I think the NCAA is somewhat realizing that more. But nevertheless, it doesn't impact this really at all. So I just hope we don't hear any more about that for the most part. If something happens and it has to do with Harbaugh, I don't really know how you police that anymore. I used to think, yes, bring the punishment down, cut scholarships, do something to the coach, but then nothing impactful really happens to those that committed the violation. So I'm kind of past all of that for the most part, and I hope we don't hear that garbage on this championship. The other things, Georgia should have been able to beat Michigan. Georgia would have won this. Hearing a lot of that, and that's just ridiculous. It certainly could have happened. I was talking before we started these playoffs that I still think, a healthy Florida State, Georgia, even Oregon, and Ohio State. I think we had 8 teams capable of winning the national championship if we put any combination of those 4 in. And I still think now that Michigan is at least a half step ahead of everyone. They obviously proved it by beating Ohio State, Washington, and Alabama, half the field, with themselves being one of the participants. So it's hard to argue with those results. Oregon would have been fun to see in there. Again, their 2 losses were by field goal each to Washington. You can say they shouldn't be in there. Fine, they weren't in there, right? They did 2 losses to the same team. Would Washington beat them a third time? Should they have had to play Washington a third time? Would they have beat Michigan? You make a lot of comments on that. And then Georgia. Georgia was not as good this year. Not on offense, not on defense, not the offensive line, not the skill position groups, not on in the defensive secondary. They were not nearly as good as a football team this year. By statistics, by eye test, by any measure, they were not dominant. And actually, if you really want to nitpick, I'll go back through the past 2 championships. They had some dominant numbers, But even the first one they won against Alabama. They lost to Alabama the first time. Alabama had some injuries. Second time, managed to pull it out. But Alabama was down receivers. Second time, they were able to beat TCU, but they barely beat Ohio State. Came down to just a missed field goal. So we could talk about Georgia's dominance. That's a real thing. But you also have to keep in mind they were that close to losing a number of different games. And the loss to Alabama in the SEC championship game was the biggest loss out of all of them. That was a sound loss. And this team is not as good. And the Alabama team was not as good. This is not as good as the Georgia team. So to just say that Georgia was better than Michigan, you did not watch enough football this year. You did not. You can make an argument, but to just say that is absolutely wild. Because you know what? Georgia could have also lost like 4 of these other teams. They could have. This was not just a 3P team. That is preposterous. So, Michigan still half step ahead of everyone else. But I still think a lot of these other teams, Washington, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, again, Florida State, no quarterback there, not as healthy. We can say what we want about the defense. Not having quarterback is a big problem, especially when we found out the reserve was actually banged up too. I think any of those teams would have been interesting in the playoffs, but Michigan proved it on the field that it was the best and is at least a half step ahead of everyone else this year. The right team won the national championship, and sometimes that's been a little bit in doubt, but at least for the most part, this 4-team playoff has worked out. So starting next year, we got some interesting stuff. We got a 12-team playoff. We have changing of conferences, a lot of weird schedules. Turning on the football games week to week won't be as strange, but looking at the full schedules over the extended season, it'll be weird. Like, who do we play already? Who do we have coming up? Going to the games and realizing what's going on, the flights and the travel your teams are going through. It's just going to be a lot to process, I think, initially. And coaches is the next part. So let's talk about our old guys, huh? Nick Saban retires. At the time I'm recording this, it's just been decided who the new head coach would be. So Steve Sarkisian said that he is going to stay at Texas. Dan Lanning said that he's going to stay at Oregon. And we did have a couple of the names in the mix there. Lane Kiffin did not leave on a good note from from Alabama. Not sure if he was in the mix there at all. Dabo, besides the poor performing of Clemson and not using the transfer portal, there was a possibility that he could come back, but was it really? Or is that all outside speculation? And then Norvell is getting a massive extension and staying at Florida State. So that ruled at least 3 guys out. 2 of them were already questionable, and that's a lot of the heavy hitters. So Washington loses its coach. He is going to Alabama. His career record here, 104-12 as a head coach, Mr. Kalen DeBoer. Their offense has a lot of fun stuff. You could see them in the playoff games throughout the season. Did a lot of fun stuff with Penix there. This seems to me like a pretty good hire. I like it. Of course, you don't know till you know, and he shows up and things start happening. But he seems pretty creative. He seems up with the times, quite frankly. He'll use the transfer portal. He'll bring in new coaching staff. He'll keep what's good. He'll change around what he needs to. He just seems like someone who's modern and someone who wins wherever he goes. So I like it. Speculation is that Nick Saban likes it, and he'll still be around. Of course, I don't know with some of these older coaches that are retiring, like Mike Krzyzewski, if they're actually going to still hang out, or if they're just like a phone call away, you can call me, or I'll come and show up to a game. I don't know what that actually means as far as he'll still be around. Obviously, he's retiring, so he doesn't want to be around too much, right? He's got new property down in Florida. So I think it's a good hire. I mean, questions with the other coaches, which is strange to say because they are the other top guys in the country. And Alabama's not just going to roll into another national championship. It's possible. We're already seeing decommitments, which is to be expected. This program has been Nick Saban, all Nick Saban for 15 plus years. And he's had guys in and out because they've been hired to other positions. that's well charted. There's been a number of books read. I've read several books. I've got a couple more on my reading list. Like there's a half dozen books, and there'd be more to come now that he's retired. Nick Saban, comparing Nick Saban to Bear Bryant. Lots of literature out there, lots of coverage, obviously. So I'm not stating anything new. But this is about the best that they could expect, I think. Someone with a proven track record right now, someone who's with the times, someone who's not afraid to come in and possibly fail, and someone who doesn't have question marks like Sarkisian or Kiffin, someone who was willing to leave. Even Norvell, I think, had question marks. Lanning probably wasn't going to leave. And I think you could push for 10 wins still next year if you're Alabama. They don't play Texas next year on the schedule. They don't play Ole Miss next year on the schedule. Yeah, they do have Georgia, but for the most part, it's just back to business. And he'll be able to coach up the talent that they have there. Of course, we'll have guys transferring. We'll have, he's got to recruit, coaching, all kinds of stuff's got to be, everything's got to be figured out still. Both his credits, the reputation's still there at Alabama. You'd think that they'd be pretty fine there, quite frankly. So, but a lot of coverage and pieces on Nick Saban, someone who really isn't a controversial figure. Yes, you see him yelling on the sidelines, that kind of thing, but he's never had any scandals. He's never had any players with big scandals. He's never done a lot of questionable things. He's explained for the few guys that have acted out of the thousands of kids that have come through that program. One of his infamous clips is, would you rather have them on the street or would you rather have them here? Would you rather have me basically giving them a second chance to kind of make up for mistakes and to improve their lives and move forward? Which I think is a great thing, depending on what's going on, to abide by, So, just a great guy. There's been different pieces about how he carefully tracks academics and that kind of thing. Now, that's not said about every college coach. That's said here and there about some of them. Whether that all rings true or not, I don't entirely know. But that sounds like a great system. A lot of the guys do go pro. Some of the guys do come back for college degrees. But while you're in school playing football, you should be doing classes and getting what education you can for afterwards, in my opinion, as someone who comes from a family of teachers. My dad always loved Nick Saban. Back when he was here at Michigan State and followed his career all the way through. I don't know if he'll be watching Alabama games anymore. Might be past that time now. But he was always a coach that believed in second chances, believed in education, believed in doing things the right way and having a plan. And just a really great guy. And nothing crazy has ever, surfaced about him. And there's, everyone has something, but there's never been anything wild about Nick Saban. So you have to appreciate him, especially as one of the winningest coaches, as someone who's done a lot for these guys' careers and lives. I love sports. I love football. I love basketball. But sometimes you have to remedy in your head that these are still people. They still have flaws. And sometimes you take bad with good. Whether it's universities exploiting players or coaches exploiting players by simply recruiting them, and then as soon as they make a mistake, and I'm not talking about a big criminal, a major crime, but maybe some kind of smaller mistake, then kicking them off the team and pulling their scholarship instead of perhaps giving them a second chance or something like that. I consider that using them. You got to be here, you got to be perfect, and we're going to use you because you're going to win me games in the field towards my next $1 million contract, right? And he's just always done things the right way. So, got to appreciate that. But Nick Saban, moving on. And I'm kind of upset now because I thought of this when he retired. And we had Bill Belichick officially released. And I've been doing a posting that I read several. Bill Belichick. I read the book Bill Belichick, and then I read The Dynasty covering the Patriots. And I'm in the middle of another one. I'm listening to an audiobook, but several Patriots literature books, aka literature, recently, just to give me a better perspective on the sports and their history and their rules and their structure and their stadiums, where they were in culture and the players and just everything, the full scope, and my appreciation of football and basketball. And, what he was able to accomplish was, of course, incredible. And him and Saban were, of course, coaches together with the Cleveland Browns years back, and they should have a podcast together. I think that would be great. I think Nick Saban's going to go into broadcasting. I think that was, if not hinted at, somewhat said in some effect, if not recently, then in the past, that he would do that when he retires. Not sure what Belichick is going to do for sure yet. And now that's all over social media now. Some speculation, not speculation, but thoughts that they should do a podcast together. But I had the same thought. I know Pete Carroll was on a podcast for, I believe it was The Ringer, briefly, in one of the off seasons last year or 2 years ago. Was talking about coaching. Steve Kerr was one of the guests. I think Sean McVay was on one of them, and he would be great as well. I'm not sure if he's going to retire. I know he's almost more than twice the age of some of the younger coaches in the NFL right now, which is crazy to think about. He still seems quite energetic, but losing those trio of guys, and Pete Carroll in his own right, winning a Super Bowl and a national championship, doing what he did for USC and Seattle is incredible. Even if you don't think that, he didn't win the championships that Nick Saban did, or that, of course, Belichick did, is still incredibly impressive. Whether you establish a long-time dynasty at a particular program, or you're able to do it at multiple places through multiple, at the college level and at the pro level, that is incredible. That is incredibly difficult to do and very rare. I would argue Debo doesn't, for example, Debo at Clemson doesn't even have that. He had a few good years. He won 2 championships in 3 years, and he might never climb that mountain again. That wasn't a dynasty. That was a good few years. So you just don't have that. Georgia has it right now in college football. Alabama had it. Well, actually, I would argue Georgia doesn't have that either. I take that back. Alabama has it. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen very often. So, and arguably the Patriots did it twice. Early 2000s, early 2000s, and then early 2000s, and then in the 2010s. So, and Alabama did it for over 20 years. So, just incredible. And I hope we don't quite see any of these guys. If they're not coaching on the sidelines, I'd be fine with fresh blood for all 3 of them. Then I'd certainly like to see them podcast form or broadcasting something. We'd get to see more of their personality, certainly. And they both have, all 3 of them have coaching trees. And we'd get to see still some guys out in coaching circles and on the field with their similar styles and stuff like that. So I'd actually prefer to see them kind of relax and maybe see them in the broadcasting booth or in some kind of other form. I'd be pretty okay with that. All right, my NFL picks on the year, 177 and 95. That's 65%. All right, acceptable, I suppose. The spread, I didn't start picking until week 8, 91, 67, and 7. That's 51.1%. Acceptable, I suppose. Last week, 9 and 7 in my picks, 10 and 6 against the spread in the last week of the season, which is certainly hard to pick with some guys getting benched and all the shenanigans that goes on the last week of the regular season. So, got to tell you, little disappointed that Jacksonville didn't make it in. They got to figure some things out there, whether they're going to make staff changes. Is Trevor Lawrence really going to be the quarterback moving? I mean, he's going to be the quarterback for now, but is he going to be at that superstar level? just kind of astounding that they choked the game away to the Tennessee Titans, who then turned around and fired their coach, which is resounding because Vrabel's been solid, even if they've had some disruptions to the roster there. So he's got to find a new home. Supposedly him and the owner did not get along so well, and just a lot of changes coming to that division. I am excited that the Texans made it in. Very excited about that. Happy to see the Browns, even though they've been all banged up this year with injuries and are not operating at max capacity, are in the playoffs as well. It's unfortunate those two teams are playing each other. And get the Dolphins in, of course. Excited to see that. Bills snuck in. Happy to see that. Lions, thrilled to see that. Their ticket prices, by the way, in the nosebleeds are going for like 3 to 6 times the nosebleeds of any other stadium, which is terribly unfortunate. But anyways, excited for the matchups. I think we got a good slate here. And I think Jacksonville is really my only huge disappointment. Would have liked to see them keep things together and at least make it into the playoffs. That would have been nice to see, but now they got to make some decisions. Also, Chicago, I got to tell you, the loss to the Packers was disappointing, considering, again, they'd won 5 of 7 heading into the back end of the season there. Only 2 losses on the road at a good Cleveland team and a good Lions team, where they had the lead in both of those games heading into the fourth quarter. And they just started to look good late. So, and now they're probably going to have to boot Fields out of there just to get Caleb Williams and get him on a cheap contract. That's how to build up the team there. Get a quarterback that's really good on a cheaper contract. So you can put money elsewhere. That's probably what's going to happen. And I'd like to see Fields, what he can do someplace else. So, now, my preseason guesses, I did have San Francisco and Kansas City in a rematch for the Super Bowl, and I had San Francisco winning a title finally, a team that's been in gear since Shanahan's been here. I think it's been frustrating not to see them win a Super Bowl with how talented that roster has been. I originally had NFC projections. I had San Francisco, the Dallas Cowboys, the Detroit Lions as the top 3 seeds. I at least had those guys in there. And division winners, I had the Saints. That's wrong, obviously. Then the Eagles. And then I had the Seahawks and Commanders, 2 disappointing teams. So a little over half right there. And then the AFC, I had Chiefs as the 1 seed, then the Dolphins, then the Ravens, then the Jaguars, followed by Bills, Bengals, Chargers. Obviously another disappointing year for the Chargers. Quarterback injury there, as well as the Bengals. And then we just discussed the Jags. So 8-4-14 overall. However, still in the running to have correct AFC and NFC championships. I had the Chiefs over the Bills and the Niners over the Cowboys, so still on track for that. But let's see if we can pick some winners here on the podcast over the website here. We'll handle it this week. So Saturday at 4:30 on NBC. We do have that Texans-Brown game. Texans at 10-7, Browns 11-6. They're 3-5 on the road, while Texans are 6-3 at home. Cleveland, 1.5 favorite here. Dome game, which is important because we have several cold weather games going on. 44.5 point over/under. CJ Stroud over 4,100 yards. 23 touchdowns, 5 picks. The defense has been coming along here. They've been able to run the ball a little bit more effectively. Nico Collins is coming along. Even though they've been a little banged up, he's been the top weapon there for them. Almost 1,300 yards, 8 touchdowns, 80 receptions as well. And the Browns struggling to run the football. A lot of just taking deep shots with Joe Flacco, not unlike the rest of his career. Myles Garrett is healthy and going. And the Browns defense has just been stifling. And the Texans have really struggled against the better defenses that they've played. Losses against the Ravens, Falcons, Jags, Jets, the Browns earlier in the year. So difficult time against the better defenses. So I'd love to see this continue on for the great roster here, the great staff, DeMeco Ryans, CJ Stroud, and this whole group here. But it seems like I'm going to pick the Browns to win and cover here. And time may run out on Joe Flacco in his resurgence here. Comeback Player of the Year is certainly a award that's obviously debated in its meaning. And Damar Hamlin, whether he should win it or not. As far as effectiveness on the field, it sure seems like Joe Flacco should be the one to win that award, quite frankly. So he's been very effective there. But I would pick the Browns to win and cover this game in advance. That defense is just brutal. I think they'll get pressure on Stroud, and that, again, shut down the limited weapons he has. The team really thrives on what he's able to do. And I think that they'll be able to advance at least one more week there in Cleveland. I believe that put them on track to play Baltimore next week. Peacock has the 8 o'clock game. That's terribly unfortunate. I have to find a trial for that sucker. Kansas City's favored by 4.5 at the moment, 43.5 point over under. This game is supposed to be one of the coldest games ever. So you have to think, obviously it's going to affect both teams. It's easy to say, the Dolphins are going to struggle more. They play in warmer weather. Some of these guys are from cold weather states. They played in cold weather. They played college in cold weather. So I don't think that's quite as valid. You know what I mean? So this is going to be low scoring, I would think. Chiefs offense is certainly struggling. The defense has been nitpicked recently in its effectiveness. Tyreek Hill should be back for this one, but if it is supposed to be more snowy and that cold, you have to wonder if he's going to be geared up and ready to go. And if he is, then perhaps it'll be quite damaging to what the Chiefs are doing there. So we'll have Tyreek Hill and, of course, Waddle as well. And the offense for the Chiefs has been just so miserable. They are 5-4 at home. They're 4-4 away. They did end up winning their last 2 games against the Chargers and the Bengals, but it was a 1-point and an 8-point win. Of course, losses in the Raiders to they're 3-3 to finish off the season. Just really miserable down the stretch there. And you hate to pick against them at home just because that's just not very likely to happen. And Miami lost one of its top pass rushers to injury to. His name's eluding me at the moment. They lost their last 2 games to the Bills, which was a big game, and they're thumped by the Ravens, of course. Remember that one. But still a capable team here. They just haven't quite been healthy. This should be one of the better games. Again, the cold's going to affect things quite a bit. I guess I'm going to go Chiefs to win, but Dolphins to cover in this game. But this should be interesting if we can get our eyes on it. If you can get your eyes on it on the Peacock Network. Now, Sunday, we've got a triple header. 1 o'clock CBS, we have the Bills, 11-6, hosting the Steelers at 10-7. Now, this one's a 9.5 point spread with a 33.5 point over-under. Another freezing game. They put out the alert to ask folks to come and shovel the stadium again there in Buffalo. So they'll be taking care of that overnight, Saturday into Sunday, Friday night, all over throughout the weekend to get that cleared out. Steelers are actually 5-3 on the road. Bills are 7-2 at home, winning a big game there against Miami to make the playoffs. And I think they're going to win here, quite frankly. Hard to pick against the Steelers. 9.5, I think, is too high against Buffalo, which hasn't covered that amount much at all. What are we at? Once this year they've covered that number. So picking the Steelers to cover, but Bills to win. There's the better football team right now. We'll have to see how effective they actually are. Again, this will be a weather game. We'll see how effective Steelers offense actually is. But for me, it's a pretty easy Bills pick. Steelers to cover, though. I just don't like the Bills to cover a real big number right now. 4:30 on Fox. Cowboys will be hosting the Packers. Cowboys haven't lost at home. Packers are 4-5 away, and they're just not very good, right? They snuck by the Panthers 3 weeks ago. They're getting a lot of hype right now, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it was the 33-10 win against the Vikings, which are given up at that point. Last week they beat the Bears 17-9. They kind of looked like they were very anemic. It's just they lost to the Giants just a little over a month ago still. So I'm just not sure that this is the powerhouse team that we're quite expecting here. They're not a bottom of the barrel type football team here, but still on the road at Dallas. It's going to be fired up. Touchdown spread is huge. Dallas should have everyone healthy, and Packers still have a couple guys questionable. I believe Watson's still questionable. Jair's questionable. So, and maybe they'll be fine come game time, but I think it's going to be popular to pick against Dallas. I'm at least going to pick the Packers to cover, but I think Dallas is going to win at home against Green Bay and cover the 7. 8 o'clock. We get the big one. Lions 12-5, 6-2 at home, hosting the Rams at 10-7, 5-4 on the road. Detroit's favored by 3 with the 51.5 point over under, and this is devastating. A lot of Michigan fans here still root for Matthew Stafford, and to have him now have to play the Detroit Lions at the first game at Ford Field, playoff game ever, that's truly devastating. You're either going to end his opportunity to advance, or he's going to end yours. So this is heartbreaking, quite frankly. And I think the Rams, you should have seen the clip if you haven't already from, I believe it was ESPN's NFL Live, where all 5 hosts show their picks at the same time, and every single one picked the Rams to win this game. And they were stunned that everyone else picked the Rams. Each one thought that they were going to be the only person. And I think that's going to be the trend here, quite frankly. A lot of Rams money, but the books, I believe that I last checked, are all still pretty strong on Detroit. And I don't know what to say about this. I think the Lions are going to have problems. They managed to win the last few games here against the Vikings twice and the Broncos. They did lose to the Cowboys close. They lost to the Packers. It's just the defense is a problem. 23rd in points given up, 5th in points scored. The top 5 in rushing yards, passing yards. It just seems like they are sometimes missing a little bit on offense. We know Goff doesn't do well under pressure. We know that the defense can give up what the Rams can produce. They should be healthy. They haven't been throughout the season. Matthew Stafford should be ready to go. Kyron Williams. They're going to have Puka. They're going to have Cooper Kupp. It's going to be devastating. A devastating offense, I think, by a veteran leader. And it's just very interesting that this is the matchup, because I think he's going to get a reception there, and it's going to be friendly, and it really shouldn't be. We can be friendly later. Everyone was friendly when he left. You shouldn't be when he's coming in and probably going to end your season. That's not the way that I would greet Matthew Stafford. Needs to be loud, needs to be challenging. But the Rams, I think, are so dangerous right now. So dangerous. Again, haven't been healthy. Brought in more free agents, undrafted guys than anyone else, because they were making the transition from cutting the rest of the cap and the dead weight from the Super Bowl year, and just a lot of youth on here. And everything started to come together throughout the season. We thought Sean McVay might return the offseason. Matthew Stafford had surgery. Aaron Donald was talking about retiring. Cooper Kupp was hurt. And then we had all 4 back. Coach, top defensive player in the league, great quarterback, great receiver, and then all the pieces start to come together around them. And the Rams are playing really well right now. So I think Detroit's going to be in some trouble here. I'm picking the Rams. I hate to say it. They won 4 straight to get here, and 7 of 8. That's insane. So I hate to say it, and I'm not rooting for it, but I'm picking the Rams over the Lions on Sunday night. And finally, Monday, we have the Eagles and the Buccaneers. Buccaneers are 9-8, 4-4 overall, hosting the Eagles at 11-6. They're 5-4 on the road on ESPN. This is the 8:15. Eagles are favored by 3 with a 43.5 point over under. And I don't know how you can comfortably pick the Eagles at all. they've lost so many now. 5 of the last 6 is what the total is. I started to lose track, and the last 2 are the Giants and the Cardinals, and it's just miserable. AJ is hurt as well, AJ Brown. Not sure if he'll be playing. In that particular case, they'll be susceptible to give up points. They won't be able to complete big plays. We have to remember Jalen Hurts hurt his finger last week. This team is a dumpster fire. And for all the struggles that the Buccaneers and that associated NFC South have had this year, they actually have a defense that can do some things, that can restrict what you're doing offensively, that can really shut down the Eagles in that potent run game. They are 7th in points allowed, less than 20 per game. They can't run the ball very well, but Baker Mayfield can do a few things. He's been playing well this year. They've won 5 of the last 6 games, even though some of them haven't been particularly impressive, including a 3-point win over the Panthers at home, followed by a 9-point win on the road to end the season. Nice wins over the Packers and Jaguars in that run. So I just think they're the better team. So the Eagles are favored. I actually think the Buccaneers are going to punch them out. And that's going to be my pick on that particular matchup. So we'll see how we do here. I'm excited for the games, excited for NFL action. And the playoffs are underway, and the college national championship has been decided. And next year's going to be fun. Super Bowl coming up soon. College basketball in full swing, and the NBA separating contenders. Detroit Pistons can't win a freaking game to save their lives. But yeah, lots of exciting sports at this time as we're winding down the football season and in full action for basketball. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you later.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat turn into a Bentley. See, I'm stunned, so I'm all I'm thinking, please don't tell me.